So it's a pleasure to be able to take part in this artist talk. Yeah, we're taping during the great snowstorm. Unfortunately, the talk was canceled, but Bruno's been so kind as to allow me to kind of contribute via video. So yeah, my name is Jonathan Gaynor, and these are my aeroglyph artworks. We all know the word glyph. Um, Glyph is a symbol in a writing system. Think, the Mayan code or hieroglyphs. It's also can be a symbol that conveys meaning non-verbally, like an arrow in a road sign. Um, and my work started when I was shooting architecture as a photographer, an aerial cinematographer. I realized I could use a kind of doubling effect to isolate architectural forms and kind of elevate them in space, as you might see if you've seen the film in the other room. And in so doing, kind of contemplate the the architectural forms, the the cityscapes, and turn them into city shapes, and use that as a way to kind of try to decode the city as if it's a writing system. Um, yeah. So I mean, it started. I was an aerial cinematographer for years, and in Dubai, in the Middle East, and often, I would shoot things like cars. I shot a lot of car stuff like Top Gear, and I shot a lot of tourism films and commercials and real estate developments and whatever you shoot with drones. And often when I would come home from shoots, I would have these flight paths, these drone flight paths kind of blazed into my retinas. And as a filmmaker, I sometimes edit my own work. So I realized that on a timeline, I could take these various flight paths and I could double the images and create these glyphs, these city glyphs, and then I could mask them and blend them together, and connect them and create these aeroglyphs, that allowed me to kind of explore, through dialogues of different parts of the city with itself or with other parts, right? So it actually started with this one over here. Uh, this was actually not in the Middle East. This is the Valencian architect Calatrava's Città des Arti Sciences, and this area here is a reflecting pool, and I was shooting from about down here, and I'd been to the market that day with my wife. As you know, in Andalusia, there's this wonderful open markets, and so we bought a lot of fish. And my wife Claudia was cooking cooking some fish for us, and she called me and said, "Jonathan, come home." And I'm waiting. I'm shooting here, and the wind is blowing, and so I'm not getting a proper reflection of the work in the water. But this was a really important image to me because Calatrava's work is just above here, and if you look at this, it's really cool and futuristic. But it's only when seeing it through its reflection that his kind of intention is to reference a fish bone, um, is revealed. And so I broke a rule for architecture photographers. And maybe this is the moment where, like, this series of work at least moved from verity photography into art. I decided, okay, fine, I'm going to eat my own fish. And to get this fish in the reflection, I'm going to do the doubling myself. And so I'll recreate the reflection in Photoshop, and I'll do it like that. And it was a joy, modulating the reflections, playing around with it. And so I realized that I could do that with other works, in other parts of the city. So I started applying it to drone cinematography. Um, and here's another one, Al Zahir, the manifest. this is a work about the Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque in Abu Dhabi. And the architecture is amazing. It's a spiritual center for Abu Dhabi. And I think the kind of experience that the mosque is trying to provoke in one is one of spiritual transcendence. And so this technique allowed me to, these domes here are in the actual mosque. This upper layer of domes is a kind of doubling or reflection of the primary layer. And so the image is meant to kind of create a visual analogy of the transcendent spiritual experience that you feel when witnessing this mosque. This was shot just a month and a half ago, and it's an altogether different kind of psychogeography. You've got this tallest building in the world blazing into the sky, and there just happened to be clouds passing by nocturnally, which allowed the very strong lighting on the Burj Khalifa to come through the clouds and create this kind of rapturous effect. And then these squadrons of floating dark buildings, and it kind of emulates how I felt at about that time. I probably felt a little doomsy, and that certainly affected the choice I made later that night when I started taking the background, which is the same skyline, but blown up, and using that as a kind of background or framing device for a realistic image of the city. Here's another aeroglyph that is about a dialogue, in this case, between Dubai and Abu Dhabi. So I took the domes of the previous image that you just saw, Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque, and kind of put the Dubai skyline in the middle, so they're kind of both racing up. And then I took another cityscape and kind of backgrounded that dramatic interaction, and then put yet another cityscape within the confines of a kind of foreground structure of buildings to kind of create that tension. Hopefully that's thematic, but is also kind of a dialogue between the architectural choices and forms of the twin cities or the related cities of Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Here's another one over here that is also about that. This is titled Post-Historical Dream Oyster Yum Yum Yum. And it's Abu Dhabi is building a consortium, an agglomeration of beautiful museums on Saadiyat Island. And within the space of a few blocks, you have a Jean Nouvel, and you have a Foster, and you have lots of amazing works of architecture. And so those edifices are built to contain art, right? And whereas Dubai is building developments that are kind of artworks themselves. So I took an island development, very luxurious island development in Dubai, and kind of veiled it in the perforated roof of Nouvel's Louvre to kind of create, hopefully, a dialogue between the two forms of architecture and also the developmental directions that the respective cities have chosen. This was actually, I was introduced by Marriott Westerman of the Guggenheim, the CEO of the Guggenheim, just 2 weeks ago in Abu Dhabi as part of the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week. And it was really an amazing honor to have the work kind of feature in that show. And since then, I've been doing more work about the relationship between the museums in Abu Dhabi and how they relate to a kind of reconfiguration of artistic canons in the Middle Eastern context, and also about the role of architecture as a showcase for cultural heritage and memory. So I'm in Abu Dhabi. I'm taking drone images and drone photography, and I'm putting them together and trying to figure out what the architecture was saying to me. and it unlocked something that I've been that had been distilling for 25 years. I was lucky enough to study in Paris, and while there, I was really obsessed with this group of radical philosophers called situationists, Guy Debord and Raoul Vaneigem, and in this group of, they were the French equivalent of the Merry Pranksters. They were instrumental in Strasbourg revolts in '66, May '68, and the situationists, they had a grudge going back to 100 years before they were alive, and that was against the architect Haussmann. Now, there had been a great revolt called the Paris Commune in the 1860s, 1870s, 1870s, and thank you, Bruno. And so that revolt was suppressed with a machine gun called the mitrailleuse, which we know as the Gatling gun, and that our Gatling gun was developed in France to mow down socialists and anarchists, right? And so these guys were the torchbearers, so to speak.
We call them the communards.
Les communards. Ouais. Même la groupe musical, les communards. What? And so I was really enamored with all things French, but particularly situationists. And so Napoleon III had hired Haussmann to cut an axis, think axis, right through the center of Paris, from Champs-Élysées to Concorde to the Louvre. And what they did was they replaced all these great neighborhoods where, the situationists thought they would be great for cafes and barricades, not big imperial promenades to worship the envy of Napoleon III, but rather to dream and to scheme. And so they were upset, and they took that ennui and they developed something which is now a really seminal part of urbanism today, and it's called psychogeography. And psychogeography is it's the study of the psychology of a particular slice of geography, like, for example, a neighborhood or a city. And so they develop these methods to kind of put a city onto the couch, in therapy, and reveal its kind of hidden, desires and its hidden codes and its hidden tendencies. And so they developed methods for doing that. One of them was called the drift. And the drift is very much that. You walk through the city without any fixed purpose, randomly, nothing transactional, and try to intimate, try to feel what the city is trying to tell you, which is obviously very subjective. But that was kind of their point. If urbanism is a religion, then its iconography is architecture, right? And so architecture conveys ambience and meaning and belief. It also scripts behavior. So the situationists were very concerned about, what they're being told to do by the various architecture. You can relieve yourself here in the pissoir or there against the wall, but not on the sidewalk, because that's for the dogs. Yeah, so it unlocked something that I felt in Paris as a student, and I'm in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and I'm using these techniques to ask about, the encoding of ideas and belief and feelings and behavior in architecture, and what it means to build things like this. And then I go back to Paris. I get a job to shoot for Ned Kahn, the great sculptor who makes sculptures and architecture that reflects the movement of wind. And he sends me to Paris, and it's just before the Olympics in Paris. And I brought my drone, and that helped unlock something, because I'd been thinking about these dead French philosophers, and here I am, and the Mitterrand Library was something I wanted to shoot with my drone. So I found a place in the park, kind of like a sniper, and I fly my drone across, and I shoot the the Mitterrand Library, and the gendarmes see my drone, and I use the drone to lure them away from where I was, and then circled back, packed the drone up, and made off on one of those electric bikes that you can rent. So there was a frisson of transgression that was perfect because it allowed me in what was a pretty lonely and anxious mission to connect, to imagine some connective tissue between what I was doing and the situationists, what they were doing. Now, they were radical philosophers interrogating the nature of like images in cities in a far more provocative way, but they felt like what I'm doing, using drones, in this case, clandestinely to kind of see the city in my own terms, was maybe an update of the drift into the era of drones, into the aerial era, so to speak. And it allowed me to kind of situate what I was trying to do, often in isolation, with this larger kind of historical tradition of inquiry. Yeah. It was a great way to articulate a lot of things that I've been interested in before. I studied in Paris, and I lived in Berlin for 15 years, where I studied there. I was obsessed with the post-communist transformation of the city of Berlin. Each of these places have this immense uniqueness about it. You know, Berlin had been one of the most interesting cities, and still in many regards is, in terms of historical change. And if Berlin was a registration of everything that happened in the 20th century, you know, they invented both communism and fascism, and Berlin was the divided city that punctuated the Cold War. Well, Dubai is almost pure future. So it was very kind of almost schizophrenic kind of dualism, going from, you know, having half of my brain in Dubai and half still kind of in Berlin with all of its historicism. So it made me start thinking about, you know, what do you do when you have a tabula rasa of deserts? How do you build a city, and what reasons do you build what you ultimately build? Because Dubai is, it's a dream for drone people because it's the world's most vertical city. You know, as you can see, it's a towering city, and so it's also something that is occupying space that was empty. The city is the model of the city is almost pure future shock. If you're an Emirati in your 80s, you were likely born in a Baraski hut, which is kind of a thatched hut, in a time that could be described as nomadic feudalism or tribal nomadism, which was alive and well until the 1960s, in that area, the empty quarter, but also in the Gulf.
Yeah, and that's only 40 years ago.
That's only 40 years ago, right? And so if you were born in a Baraski hut in tribal feudalism, and now your grandkids live in glass towers with helipads, which will soon host electric, you know, low carbon footprint drone taxis, you know, fleeting between, you know, these downtown cityscapes and artificial islands. It's like Rip Van Winkle woke up in Avatar. It's just it's a crazy future shock, and there are critiques of Dubai that say, well, it's only it's so eclectic. There's an emptiness about that. There's almost a soullessness about that. And it speaks to our notions in the West about authenticity and identity. But no country in the world has experienced such profound and rapid economic as well as architectural and physical growth, as has Dubai. And so one of the most moving things that was ever said to me about Dubai was by a Financial Times journalist. He said, "Well, Jonathan, when you look at Dubai and it's splendorous rows of towers, down the whole Sheikh Zayed Road. One day they'll go all the way to Abu Dhabi." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "What I see is an act of veneration to the West, um, veneration." Uh, and that's to say that they're at a time when Dubai is being and the UAE is being welcomed onto the world stage as a financial and geopolitical and dare I say, cultural player. Um, it is building architecture that is this very eclectic assemblage of the world's architectural designers, right? So it's a population that's 90% expatriate. And so whereas some countries extremely wealthy with minerals and extractables either hoard their wealth or build monuments to themselves, uh, the United Arab Emirates is building cityscapes that are emulations of the kind of pluralism um, that they see is encoded in the West. And so if these cityscapes are containing codes, I think that's what they are. So rather than being a deracinated break with the past, it's an embrace of a new kind of globality, for better or for worse. There's certainly arguments from both sides, but it also bespeaks a change in the world right now. This very week, Russia and Ukraine are having peace talks in Abu Dhabi. 2 weeks ago, there were 14 presidents at the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week talking about themes such as these. So they're definitely they've arrived as a new kind of player in the kind of space of global power and global discourse. And for me, I think the architecture as a kind of messaging system can give us a lot to think about because it's an echo. It's a kind of Western modernity and postmodernity refracted in the eyes of a postmodern Gulf, and then consumable by us as visitors, participants, and I don't know, beholders of these new aesthetic forms. So
Well, what's interesting is in the past, people will move in and build a city. In this case, in Dubai, it's more they built a city and the people are moving in.
right, it's a build it, and they'll come type of aesthetic.
Yeah.
It's also really interesting that most cities develop organically by replacing urban dwellings with skyscrapers. This stuff is built on naked sand. These cityscapes were built where there was nothing. They're island archipelagos that you can see from space, that are adornments and extensions of the city
Well,
in a way that
it's it's almost like a vignette, a side view of what is going to happen in the future where when they build a city in space
right.
first, and
Right.
then the people will move in.
Yeah, I think there's a reason that Elon Musk is often in Abu Dhabi. Definitely. But I think even more terrestrially, I think the cityscapes of the UAE, because they're built on a development model, which is basically a plug and play free zone model. That's to say you have a purpose built development for example, we have internet city and we have media city or we have construction city or things like this. The modeling of the development zone and the architecture of the zone are part of a combined messaging system. And so they grow out. And so not just as models of future space colonies, the film in the other room is Dubai Ad Astra, which means Dubai to the stars. So it imagines the city as a space colony, but not just intimations of um, our kind of extraterrestrial or beyond Earth future, but also for earthly development models. I think that these cityscapes just might be the city shapes of the future. I don't know. I don't have an answer to that, and it's like your guess is as good as mine. I do think that now the world's in a place where things are changing so quickly. And media and forms and consciousness and cities that, there's kind of a phantasmagoric aspect of our blitzkrieg of information hitting us from all sides. And I guess this work is a maybe a kaleidoscopic view of the built ways in which this new postmodernism, this futurism is being constructed before our eyes. Yeah, so hope you like the images, and thank you for listening.